Hi everyone, welcome to the Provo Library for our Boredom Busters this afternoon. We are really excited to be here. My name is Tiffany and this is Joella. She's going to be helping me today, and we're going to actually be talking about a book for Guys Read. So I know a lot of you have maybe taken this book home and read it this month, or maybe you've just read it at another time. So we're going to talk about it a little bit. The book that we are going to talk about today is called Jinx by Sage Blackwood. And this is just a fun story if you like books about magic. This is a fun story about a young boy who discovers that he has magic within himself when he becomes an apprentice to a wizard. So there's a lot of fun things that I learned and took away from this book, and I really enjoyed it. So in the story, Jinx, he decides that when you travel, you learn. So what could you learn from traveling, Joella?
Oh gosh, there's lots of things I can learn from traveling. I remember when I was little, I actually went on a trip with my dad. He had a business trip and we went down to Arches, and I remember standing there looking at this sandstone arch thinking, the world is so different than my backyard and my house. And I think you can learn about how the world was formed, about geology, about places and cultures and people, and how even just a few hours drive away, the world is a little bit different from where you live currently, because you can go in the mountains and the canyons, or down southern Utah has a whole bunch of national parks and things like that, and the world is different, just a little bit a ways away from each other.
That's so true. One thing growing up, we always went and saw different states, and my dad always wanted to go to like state capitals, because we would learn at state capitals what kind of things they did within that particular state, like what kind of things they would grow, what kind of things, what was their state song, different things like that. So there was a lot that we learned, and I think you get traveling, you get to meet a lot of people.
Oh, for sure.
You know, make acquaintances. One of my favorite experiences with traveling with my family was getting lost. I remember several times we would joke about the fact that if we found the graveyard, that we knew we were lost for sure. So there's definitely lots of things to see and learn about in the world. And can you imagine, what would you do if you could never leave your house? Do you think your life would be different?
Kind of like now.
Right?
Now we can't leave our house very
Exactly.
often.
We're kind of stuck in our home, and so just imagine that, what it would be like if you could never leave your house, if you couldn't even leave your street, you couldn't go any farther than the street that you live on. It would definitely affect what kind of a person you were.
Well, and that's kind of like Jinx in the book, because Gooseberry Clearing is where he was from, and he had a chance to go back after he left and realized how his life would have kind of stalled, and he wouldn't have learned as much if he hadn't had the opportunity to go away and become apprentice to this magician.
Right. So definitely traveling can help us learn.
Yeah.
And along with that, in the story, there's another character named Sophie.
True.
And Sophie tells Jinx that knowledge is power. So thinking about that, if knowledge being power, what kind of knowledge do we gain, or what kind of power do we gain from reading books or going to school?
Well, I think there's a lot of things, and just last week I read a cookbook, and I made a recipe from a cookbook and a recipe, and I had to read through the ingredients and figure out what I have and measure things correctly and put it together in the right order and all of that kind of thing. And I think if you weren't able to read, then you couldn't translate understanding how to do things, such as making a recipe or following craft instructions or things like that. You have to be able to read and then understand what you're reading, and in order to be able to do something, to accomplish something.
That's very true. Yeah. And I think too, with reading, we also get the opportunity to learn even more, right? So as we learn and understand things, we eventually can do more things. And so reading is kind of the base that we kind of build upon. It's like that building block. And so it gives us the power to do more things, to become better, right?
Because you couldn't watch this this video of our boredom buster unless someone knew how to read to get to the right website in order to click on it.
Exactly.
Like there's so many things that are just associated with reading and being able to know how to act upon what information you gather from the reading.
Right, exactly. All right, one last question.
Okay.
So one thing that I really liked in this book was that Jinx has the power or the ability, it's kind of like a superhuman power, to see emotions. So he would see clouds, different colored clouds around people's heads. So what secret or superpower or ability would you like to have? And if you could choose any power, what would it be?
Well, it probably wouldn't be the seeing emotions. I think that would be interesting. But I think for me, the power I mostly would want is how to stop time and have everyone else stop and me be able to keep doing things. So that way, if I stopped time and I took an hour-long nap and then started time after my nap was over, I would have an hour-long nap in what felt like a minute. And I think that would be pretty swell. Or I could think of all the books I could read if I were able to stop time and just read books.
So
I think that would be really fun.
That'd be a great superpower. I actually really liked Jinx's power of being able to read emotion. I think it's fun I think it would be really nice to know if someone was lying to you, if somebody was mad at you, but they were trying, but they weren't.
Or if they were teasing you.
Or if they were teasing you, exactly. And Jinx kind of relies on that ability quite a bit. But when he's in a different part of the book, he loses that power and that ability, and he has to learn to do without. And so you can still get along without it, but I think that would be a really cool superpower or ability to have. All right. Well, thank you, Joella, for joining us for our discussion. And we're going to talk a little bit about, in the book, Jinx has a connection with the trees. In fact, there was a part in the book that I really liked, that when Jinx was 8 years old, he felt, before he was 8 years old, he was scared of the forest, and he felt like the forest was trying to come after him. But when he turned 8 years old, he discovered that the forest enveloped him, and if he and it were part of a single enormous living thing. And he just felt that connection to the trees and the forest. And he found that he had a power and an ability to understand what the trees were saying, and he became known as the listener. So today I thought it would be fun to think about, or to do a plant. So a lot of you probably have some kind of cup or a bottle, some kind of something you could put some seeds in. We're going to make a seed sprout, and that you may have done this before, but I think this is a fun activity. So you just you could take some seeds that you can get from your pantry. It can be any type of seed. Lima beans, pinto beans, and lentils tend to sprout sooner and faster, but if you don't have those, any kind of a bean that you have in your mom's pantry you can use. So you'll get some beans, a container, and then you need something that will hold on to water and moisture. So you could use cotton balls. I brought some paper towels today. And so you're just going to take whatever item you have. If you have cotton balls or your paper towels, I'm going to wad my paper towels up and put them kind of right in the center of my cup or container. And this is what's going to kind of hold the moisture around my bean seeds. Okay, and then I'm going to put my beans in. Kind of want to smash them down. Good. Put my beans in, and if you put your bean between whatever you've got in the center and the outside of the cup, you'll be able to watch it and see it better. So I'll put in a couple of seeds, a couple of bean seeds. You can do 3 or 4, just kind of drop them in there. Okay. One thing that I did find is if your bean is cracked or split at all, it doesn't work as well. So try and kind of sort through your beans and find some that are whole and don't have any cracks. And then you're going to take a little bit of water. Now you don't need a lot of water because you don't want your beans swimming in the water, but you need enough to moisten the paper towel or the cotton balls that you're using. You want them to be wet enough that the beans can still get that moisture, because they're going to need that moisture. Now, one of the most important things besides water for a plant is sunlight, right? So once you've got your bean seed in there, you can kind of see my different seeds, around there. You're going to put this in a windowsill where it can get that sunlight and the warmth. Even though we've had some really nice days, you don't want to put this outside because it may get too hot and it'll dry it out. The wind will cause the moisture to evaporate too quickly. So keep it in a windowsill. Within a couple of days, you should notice that your bean is going to start wrinkling and the skin's going to start kind of expanding. And then you should, right after that, 3 or 4 days, you should be able to see the sprout or the root starting to grow on your seed, on your plant. Once you've got a nice seed going, should look something similar to this, then you're going to want to plant it. It won't continue to germinate and grow inside of this container. It does need to have some dirt. So if you wanted to just do this as an experiment to see the roots and things of a bean plant, you could do that. Or you can also plant it outside. So find a good place, with some dirt, and you could plant your seed out there and your bean sprout and see how it goes. Okay, so that's kind of our little craft that I thought would be fun experiment. One last thing that I wanted to share with you. In the book, Jinx has the magician that he is an apprentice to. And that magician, Simon, casts a spell on Jinx, and he takes something from him and he puts it in a bottle. Jinx kind of is floating up above, and so he sees Simon doing this, but he doesn't know what Simon took. And so I want you to think about if you were to bottle yourself and put yourself in a bottle, what would it be? So I took a bottle and I put some items in that kind of represent me, my favorite color, some of the things that I like to do, like I like to paint my nails, I like to color, I like to sew. And so I put some of these things in a bottle, and this kind of represents me. You could do this as a family activity where you have each member of your family take a bottle or a container and start gathering up things. They could draw pictures of things they like to do, maybe something that describes them, and put them in a bottle. And then everybody in the family can come around and look at the bottles and see if they can decide who is in the bottle, what person in the family is represented by the things that are in the bottle, and see how well you know yourselves as a family. All right, well, thank you for joining us today for our Boredom Busters. We'll look forward to seeing you again tomorrow for our Cabin Fever at 11 a.m. Bye.